Atlantic Ocean, upon me hills, to country, to educate, elevate, and promote. Yeah, focus on Liberia, for Liberia, Liberia, for Liberia, yeah. From Monday to Sunday. From Monday to Sunday, it's focus on Liberia. Talk about home affairs, in diaspora, current affairs, reliable information. Education, entertainment, business, sports, advertisement, articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another edition of the Liberia History Channel on Focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Jah, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. Tonight, we're going to be dealing with a very important topic, and that topic is the history of Monrovia. That's part 2. We're going to be looking at 1824 to 1924. Again, that's the history of the city of Monrovia. This is part 2. The last time when we talk about this, we dealt with from antiquity to 1824. That is before 1824, the time Monrovia was established. Now we're going to be looking at from 1824 all the way to 1924. That's 100 years of the history of Monrovia. Let me welcome Bassa Barry. He's here to assist. He's Liberia-centric, and he comes from Grand Bassa County. Welcome, Jabari.
Welcome. It's great to be back.
And let me welcome the chief presenter, Carl Yeyia. Welcome, Carl.
Thanks so much, Dennis. It's always my pleasure to be here. I did want to say that Jabari, besides being Bassa, he's also Gullah Geechee. So he's Gullah Geechee Bassa Barry.
Here you have it. We want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. This is Saturday, and we want to talk history. And the history we are talking is the history of the history of Monrovia. This is part 2. Monrovia, before Monrovia was established, how it looked like. That's what we talked about before. Was it just mud and nothing there, and somebody came and said, oh, or was Monrovia there before it was actually established? Did we have something there before it was actually established 1824? So the last time, that's why we delved into from the unknown time all the way to 1824 when Monrovia was established. This year is the bicentennial of Monrovia, 200 years of Monrovia. Can you believe that? Again, 200 years of the city of Monrovia, one of the oldest cities, man. I love that. Jabari, talk to me about Monrovia first, man.
Well, of course, Monrovia is the capital city. Of course, it was established in 1824, the same year that Liberia got its name. So this is, of course, 200 years when Liberia, the settlement, when Cape Mesurado, was now got the name Liberia instead of Christopolis. Monrovia has so much, and I'm excited to finally get to talk about it. 200 years later, we still have 200 years. We're going strong, and I'm excited to get into this.
Thank you. Cool. Monrovia is 200 years strong. What does it mean for Liberians?
Well, I mean, we went through I just want to go the part one. I really want everyone, if they can, to go back and watch part one because it really sets up this part two episode of the history of Monrovia. And Monrovia is and always has been the Mecca, the commercial center for our Grain Coast area. So even before it was called Christopolis or Christopolis, before it was named Monrovia, the part one talks about the history of the place that became Monrovia from antiquity to 1800. So Monrovia really still remains our commercial center, our coastal commercial center, our gateway to the rest of the world. We are a maritime city. We are a port city. It has been this way for a millennia, for 1,000+ years.
This is a big deal. Monrovia has been this way, has this port city, and you call it the Mecca.
Yes. So not Monrovia, of course, because Monrovia was created as a city named in the year 1824. But when I talk about it being a port city and I talk about it being a Mecca, Duco, and is a name that is far older than I know. Duco shows up as far back as the 1600s. Cape Mesurado is even older, going back to the 1400s. So this place has been a Mecca for people coming from in the rainforest and the mountainous range, mountain range area of the Guinea Forest region, which is, Nimba, Lofa, Bong, Apa, Bopolu. This has been a place to bring goods and unfortunately also human beings to sell. So if you watch the part one, this is a Mecca city. This is, and I don't mean it in a spiritual sense, but in a commercial sense.
And so today our topic will be from 1824 to 1924.
Yes.
The first 100 years after its establishment.
Yes.
Walk us through that, call.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said walk us through from 1824.
Yeah, so this map is the plan for the city of Monrovia from the year 1824. This was actually sketched. This was what they had planned to, if you look at the areas that are kind of like in a greenish, bluish, aqua kind of tint, those areas are wetlands. That's the Mesurado River. And then on the other side there, you have, of course, the Atlantic Ocean. So, and then this place that's pointing out into the sea, that kind of looks like an elbow, that's the Cape. So the city wasn't really planned on the Cape, but behind the Cape, in what we consider now to be central town, the central city, Broad Street, Ashman Street, Front Street. So that was what was really planned out. And the city was also laid out on a grid. This is very important. It was laid out on a grid. Now, the indigenous architecture and city planning wasn't on a square grid, but on a circular grid typically. So this is an introduction of square grid city planning. So we did have grids, we did have city planning, but it was usually in a more circular format. Here you come with these rigid, hard lines, something that we didn't really, even you go back to ancient Timbuktu, it was a circular grid. So this is a very un-African architectural city planning structure. Ancient Egypt had straight lines, but they worked outwards kind of in a circular format. Here you have Monrovia, left, right, north, south. Very rigid lines. I thought that was really interesting that kind of, look, the kind of way how Washington, D.C. is planned out.
Yeah, those of us who don't know about city planning, we don't appreciate that because we don't understand it. It's on our grade, it's on this grade. What does that mean?
It just means they're laying the city out in blocks. Okay. Right? And so in organized, even parcels of land for homes and future development. You're thinking this is 1824. We don't have pipe-borne water in the city yet. We don't have electrical wiring in the city yet, but they're laying the city out in the grid in preparation for those kinds of things that may happen in the future. And just for ease of movement from one place to another. It's an organized effective structure of a city.
So I'm thinking
You're
of
either
it.
going east, west, or north, south. And in between, you have alleys, you have streets. So this is basically for order
Okay.
and
Yeah.
ease of access. So that's basically what it is. Now, there are a couple of things that we're going to look at, which is some photos. This is really a pictorial history. We're going to get a little bit into the mayors, but this is a sketch that was done of the city of Monrovia at the year of independence, 1847. So as you can see, we've always been a maritime port city. We've always been a maritime port city. And if you watch the first episode, you'll really understand what that means. The control of our ports has always been in the hands of African people and their descendants. This is a image that's really powerful. You have our local feeder boats. So these smaller boats would come to shore. They also go out to sea to the ships that didn't used to come in because we didn't have an actual dock for big ships, right? So these smaller vessels would, until the port was actually built, would be the ones to carry people from the larger ships to shore. You're seeing that. You're seeing also an infantry, lined up behind here. So this would have been the militia. This is before the frontier forces. So they have the Liberian militia. They've got the church up on the hill. I mean, it is amazing. I recognize this place. This is what it looked like during the year of independence. And as we said in the last episode, Monrovia is older than Liberia. So the Republic of Liberia, 1847, City of Monrovia, 1924. I'm sorry, 1824. So 1824 Monrovia, 1847 Liberia. And this is the city of Monrovia, the year Liberia became independent.
And Jabari, you're smiling at 1824 Monrovia and 1847 Liberia. What's going through your mind?
Yeah, I mean, Monrovia is a big portion, laid the foundations. Obviously, 1847 is when the Republic of Liberia came to be, and that's when the Commonwealth and all previous laws ceased to exist. But Monrovia played a huge part in paving that way and being that launching point for what we have today. So, 1824 leads to 1847, and then it leads to 1924, 1947, and where we are today.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is another sketch, again, from the time period. This was also in the 1840s, just after independence. I want you to take a look at this kind of sand dune that you see here. And if you look to the right, you see another piece of land. And we've had an episode where we talked about Providence Island being an alluvial sand and sediment structure that constantly gets washed away and kind of so this is actually people using Providence Island as kind of a dock or a place to rest boats, and then you could just push it back into the Mesurado River. There wasn't much of it there. And this is one of the reasons I keep telling people Providence Island, the structures on that island are very new. This place has been washed away numerous times. It wasn't until Gabriel Tucker re-engineered it, when they were building the Gabriel Tucker Bridge, and they had to backfill it and join Gomez and Providence and make one island. But all the older pictures, they show that this place had been washed away. It was just a couple of swamp islands. One was Gomez, one was Providence. I found that interesting, but if you can see, it's in the Mesurado River. We can go on to the next one, unless you have questions there. This is another sketch from around 1850 of the city of Monrovia. So we have horses in the city for transportation. This is the 1800s. I know one time I was talking to my students, they said, but why they didn't have cars? Because for young people, cars have been around forever. They can't conceive of a time period, that's older than automobiles. So they kind of get a kick out. Some of them, you know, kind of new, but a lot of them are young and they didn't realize that this was a thing. But yeah, this is what Liberia looked like around 1850. President Roberts was in office, and you see a sketch here. I don't know why they have the indigenous person with just a wrapper that's way above the knees. I don't know if that's how they used to dress at that time. I thought that was a little strange. But the sketch is supposed to represent an indigenous person having a conversation with a repatriated person.
What does
Oh,
building look like?
I thought that was the president's mansion. I thought it was in front of the executive mansion.
That is the executive mansion.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the people having the conversation in the corner.
Oh yeah, I see.
Clearly, that's why I said President Roberts was in office. That's Roberts' house. Mm-hmm. That's President Roberts' house, supposedly. That's a sketch of Roberts' house in 1850. So I'll let Jabari talk about in fact, my favorite city mayor. I have two, and so we chose my two favorite city mayors. We've had other very prominent city mayors, but for the sake of time, I'll let Jabari go with one of my two favorite city mayors, and I'll discuss the second one. Go ahead, Jabari.
So he's also one of my favorite Monrovia mayors, and one of the main reasons why is he plays a pivotal part in the UNIA, one of the critical founders or critical for the Monrovia in the Liberia chapter is Gabriel Johnson. Now, for those who do not know, Gabriel Johnson comes from a family of people who were, you know, helped establish the country, helped build the country. His father was no other than Mr. Hillary R.W. Johnson, and his grandfather was none other than Elijah Johnson. So this man comes from a family of civic duty, of service to one's nation, one's family, and to the community. His brother was F.E.R. Johnson, and he was a major Pan-Africanist. He believes in connecting with African people across the globe. He came to the Pan-African Congress in 1900. So Gabriel Johnson comes from a family of men who believed in uplifting African people, Liberian people, to the best of their abilities. And it's important that you guys know who he was and just how valuable he was to Garvey, to the city, and to the country. You can go to the... Yeah, so this is an excerpt, and this is coming from in the year 1920, and it's titled "The Mayor of Monrovia, Liberia Tells of Possibilities in the Negro Republic." He says, "The Honorable Gabriel Johnson, I have to say that we must first congratulate ourselves in this organization of having been blessed by God by the appointment of the man turning to and addressing Mr. Garvey, who occupies the position of President General. His honor began. I am very pleased that he has mentioned to you that although I occupy an official position in Monrovia, I am here solely as a delegate from the local division of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, also known as the UNIA, in Monrovia. Therefore, I am not able to give you any guarantee of the Republic of Liberia in an official capacity or from the government officials there. I am able to give you an outline of the possibilities of Liberia. I may say that the idea of the UNIA, when first presented in Liberia, was no more favorably accepted than many of your states here in America. Of course, the people there live under different conditions from those you live under here. The environment is different. The troubles and perplexities they have are different, and we have our troubles and our differences just the same as you have yours. But I may say to you that after a few weeks, we succeeded in forming an organization in Monrovia, the capital city of Liberia, as well as 2 or 3 smaller divisions further in the interior. So this article is talking about the possibilities of Liberia, what Liberia has to offer, what Liberia has in assisting Marcus Garvey, who's leading the largest mass Black movement of the 20th century, practically in history. Of Black people, and he's talking about establishing not only in Monrovia, but he also goes into further into the interior, further into places that we consider, Bong and Nimba and Grand Jita. So, Gabriel Johnson was that man who believed in Pan-Africanism. Now, we've talked about earlier, things didn't turn out, but Gabriel Johnson had the vision, just like his father and his grandfather.
And we have to mention that Gabriel Johnson considered himself a Gola man. His mother was Gola. His mother was an educated Gola woman that had went to school. And that's very important to note because Hillary Richard Wright Johnson was married to an indigenous woman. So you'll see a lot of times people saying Gabriel Johnson was the first native mayor of Monrovia. That's something to point out. And he spoke Gola. And I don't know why all these Johnsons are Gola people, but Ellen Johnson to leave, everybody's Gola. So that is something to point out. He also, I think you talked about his UNIA involvement and how they paid his way to go. The UNIA paid his way to go to the United States, where he toured and gave speeches, fiery speeches, riling people up. Come to Liberia, let's build our country. We need all of the technical expertise we can get. We need bricklayers. We need, teachers. We need this. And the idea of Gabriel Johnson as a city mayor was the growing population of the city. A lot of people were migrating towards Monrovia from the interior. They needed to be able to build schools and expand and accommodate people. Isn't that strange? It's 100 years later. This is 1920, 1921. 100 years now, we're 2024. 200. So 100 years later, we're still trying to do the same things they were doing then. Looking for technical expertise, expanding schools, making sure we can accommodate a growing population. So he has some of the same challenges as mayor that we have today. The difference is, I think today the city mayor is less concerned. I think the focus more is Ministry of Education to worry about teaching, and then public works worries about infrastructure. In those days, the mayor of the city worried about all of the things happening in the city. Education, infrastructure, development, everything was on the mayor's shoulders in those days. Not that they didn't coordinate with the Secretary of Education, but in the city of Monrovia, they took that responsibility and went out and lobbied to bring resources to the city. I find that interesting.
And you took that question right out of my mouth. My question was going to be, how has that role changed over the years? Because the mayor that I look at these days now, they are more concerned about garbage collection than anything else.
I mean, I think that has become something that's overwhelmed people in recent years because the population grew so rapidly during the war. And then the sanitation systems were not adequate for the increased population. So we've always been trying to backtrack and fix it. At this time in history, it was a manageable population. People were more orderly and obedient, right? In the 1800s. You didn't just get up and have a market and just throw the trash on the street. It's like in the village, you can't do that. So things have changed. People's behaviors have changed. People don't follow rules and procedures the same way that they once did. But I don't see a lot in the primary sources from that time period where people are worried about the city being dirty. In fact, people comment on how clean Monrovia always was. So I think, this is a recent problem, and maybe that problem is so overwhelming that that's what the focus is, as opposed to having the time and resources to do the other things. But the mayor was very much about education, technical expertise. We need to bring and attract people, masons, people who can help build the city infrastructure, things like that. And there was no public works secretary of public works in those days either. So this was a city by city thing.
I wonder that time they had some form of city council.
Yes, they did.
I don't know why we lost that.
I think we still have a city council in Monrovia.
Oh, really?
It's just that we're not electing the people anymore. They're just appointed. Monrovia has a city council.
I never heard of a city council. Maybe.
I don't even know what the name of the superintendent of our most populated county is. Who's the superintendent of Monserrato? But they have all these places have city councils, and they have, I couldn't tell you the name of the superintendent for Monserrato, let alone, any of the city officials beyond Safa. Unfortunately, and I should be embarrassed to say it, but it's true.
Let's go to our next mayor.
Yeah, so everybody knows that I love C.T.O. King. Everyone knows that I love C.T.O. King. He is C.T.O. King of Abeokuta, which is now he was born into slavery. I know a lot of accounts say that he was born in Sierra Leone. He was emphatically not. He was born into slavery. He was born in Nigeria and sold into slavery as a child. Where the slave ship was rescued or liberated, and they were released near Freetown. And he spoke his dialect. He knew where he was from. Edward Wilmot Blyden met him on one of his journeys and encouraged him to relocate to Liberia. Said, "Hey, we're looking for talented, bright people like yourself. Come to Liberia." So none of this man's ancestors had ever left the continent of Africa. So they considered him a native African. And
from Abeokuta?
Huh?
You say he was born in Abeokuta?
Well, actually, Abeokuta was created because of the war that sold him into slavery.
Okay.
So his people were displaced through the Dahomians that conquered their empire, their nation, and completely ravaged the people. So the remnants, the survivors who were not sold into slavery, regrouped themselves and formed Abeokuta. And so he, knowing that these are his people, said this is who he is. This is his land, because that was a place they created in response to their oppression. This was a place they created in response to their oppression. So he was a very conscious African. He was very conscious of the brutality that human beings inflict upon other human beings, because he himself had suffered great violent loss and the treachery of being sold, the indignity of being sold into slavery. Though he did not actually cross the Atlantic, he was liberated. Fortunately for Liberia, he was liberated and repatriated to what is now Sierra Leone. He comes to Liberia as a very young man, an ambitious man, works his way through the ranks. At one point, he becomes city mayor. And his story is a triumphant one. Became a very wealthy merchant. Also became an agent, a representative, worked for ACS, had contracts for ACS. He also went to Ghana, worked for the British for a while, went back to Abeokuta, advocated for their liberation. He did so many things, but he is the father of President Charles D.B. King.
Yeah.
And so because of his wealth and his influence, he has a son that becomes president because of it, in spite of his very humble beginnings.
And
go ahead.
And that son has a great-grandson, William Thomas Bernard King of Focus on Liberia.
Yes. So this would be his great-great-grandfather.
Yes.
This would be his great-great-grandfather. Because I think he's one generation down from Olubenki King after the area.
Yeah.
So this is Benki's great-grandfather. So that would be William's great-great-grandfather.
That is correct.
Liberia's response to the call by the Honorable C.T.O. King, Mayor of Monrovia. I have read the report of the Standing Committee on Immigration for 1885 of the American Colonization Society. I have been in the habit for years of reading these reports, but I have never been so touched and thrilled as I am at this moment. The description in the report of the 4 threads in the loom of Providence is full of suggestions. Amazing threads, they all are. The pattern is from an omnipotent hand. What a privilege to have a part, however apparently insignificant, in working in this loom, while God himself designs and directs. In all the darkness of the ages of human development, God has never left himself without a witness. I have been much affected by the remark that the only ear to listen at the telephone call and gather up the cry which comes from all parts of the land where the African people dwell is the colonization society, the old colonization society which many thought dead. And in the original home of these people, Liberia is the only voice that responds and calls directly to them to come over not only to help Africa, but help them.
What was C.T.O talking about?
Yeah, she's on mute. But
I was going to say, continue to the next slide. It's actually themselves, but the paragraph continues to the next slide.
Themselves. Oh, that this little republic could more and more lift up and emphasize her voice to make herself so effectively heard that millions may be attracted and brought to her shores. Here again, the American Colonization Society is the most attentive and effective ear at the telephone. From our standpoint, of course, we do not see that the great work which God is carrying on in the United States, the rapid increase in wealth and of population, is for the simple aggrandizement of that country, that the whole effect of it is to be kept on that side of the Atlantic. And that too, when there are 7 million of Africa's sons there whose fatherland is waiting for and calling to them. We believe that America's greatest interest lies in sending help to Africa by means of her sons who have toiled so long to build up that country. Perhaps in this particular matter, we may have an illustration of truth. There is that scattereth and yet increaseth. There is that withholdeth more than is met, and it tendeth to poverty. That withholding from Africa of her sons, what it appears to me, tends so the poverty of that country. Thyself and thy belongings are not thine own so proper as to waste thyself upon thy virtues, they on thee. Heaven doeth with us as we with lighted torches do. Not light them for themselves, for if our virtues do not go forth of us, where all light or all alike, as if we had them not.
So this man was a philosophical, poetic genius, as far as I'm concerned. He was able to speak a position of strength and courage at a time when African people were subjugated globally at such a disturbing level. And here he is speaking with the dignity of a self-determinate human being. This was 1895. He's writing this. He's saying, from our standpoint, how many people in 2024 speak from the position of Africans? Even our scholars, they speak from the position of Westerners. They speak and think and act, many of us, from the position of Westerners, from the position of how America is perceiving the world, how the British are perceiving the world, how the French are perceiving this world. This man perceived this world as an African, as an intelligent, enlightened African in 1895. Here he speaks of his worldview, untainted by any concept of colonialism, untainted by any concept of inferiority. This is a person who was born on the continent of Africa, brutalized, experienced one of the most horrific wars in West African history. Dahomey conquered these people, sold them into slavery. He is a survivor of some of the most horrific events of history. But here he writes with the dignity of a scholar, of a philosopher. And sometimes beauty and poetry comes out of pain and personal experience. But what I see here is an unbroken spirit. What I see here in these words, what I hear, what I feel in his words is an unbroken spirit of self-determination, of dignity. Thyself and thy belongings, he writes. I mean, I don't know what you guys think. It's just profound. He talks about what happened in America. He's making an analogy. He's like, hey, he's basically saying these buzzards did it. We can do it too. I know he gets into this, just read his words. What are your thoughts, Dennis?
I first want to get the context. Where was he writing this? Is it like a letter, or is it a publication? Or
this is a letter. This is a letter that was.
So he's writing this letter. It's basically it's a response to a call. It's a response to a call. And if you go back to the first sentence, he said, I've read a report of the Standing Committee of Emigration for 1885 of the American Colonization Society. So he's responding to their call. The Standing Committee of Emigration for the American Colonization Society is trying to get people to emigrate. And he's putting it in its full context. He's saying, this is my position on this issue. So basically, this is about, coming and being self-determinate and not dependent.
See why he sits like that.
I would be sitting, Dennis. So this is a call about being self-determinate. These guys, some of these guys, man, they were not, these guys were some really, really, they were some really confident, people. They were cocky. They believed in themselves. They believed in us. They believed in the future. And he's clearly saying to us, he's doing this for us. Mm-hmm. And you read some of his other speeches and he talks about the dignity of Africa. He's talking about us. Everything this man said he was doing was for future generations.
And see what he's saying here. He said, from our standpoint, of course, we do not see that the great work with which God is carried on in the United States, and he talked about that great work has the rapid increase of wealth and of population, is for the simple aggrandizement of that country.
Exactly.
That the whole effect of it is to be kept on that side of the
Atlantic.
And that too, when there are 7 million of Africa's sons there.
Mm-hmm.
Whose
father's land
is waiting and calling to them.
Because he being born in Africa and being rescued from a slave ship, he knows that 7 million people were not as lucky as he to have been rescued, nor their grandfathers that were sold before he was sold. So though he had never left Africa, he understood that he knew what it was to be conquered and sold. Mm-hmm. And this is a call, a response. You're coming home. Not to keep all of the work and all of the skills and whatever it is that you built on that side, bring it with you.
Right. And my question is, does that sound like someone in Liberia now talking to us in the diaspora?
I wish. I wish, because that's what we need is the reverse brain drain. I want to remind the listeners that we had the transatlantic slave trade was one of the most catastrophic brain drains in human history. Forced migration of young, healthy, able-bodied people, men and women. Millions of them. So that you talk about brain drain, we always talk about the labor that was taken. What about the innovative minds in their prime, young people. So when we talk about reversing the brain drain, even the recent catastrophe of our civil war has removed people like Dennis Job, right? The recent catastrophe of the civil war has removed people like, my best friend Jerome Gayman, So this is this is still relevant.
Right. And that's what I brought it up, because right now we have the return of how do you call it? Diaspora
Oh, the
return.
diaspora return. Exactly.
And this is someone of power. Is the city mayor writing this? I wish, because actual actions need to be taken so that, as you call it, the reverse brain drain so we can go back.
Yeah. So Siafa, if you're watching, yeah, Mayor Siafa is doing his best. He's doing a great job. But I just think that some of this gives context that you're not operating in a vacuum. And sometimes what I love about history is that it gives you the full picture of how you got to where you are. Right? And then you see how people solve similar problems in the past.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I'll read that.
No, let Dennis read it.
Okay.
Because they'll understand Dennis a little bit better. Can you see Dennis? You don't have your glasses on. Okay, go ahead, Jabari. Sorry.
I don't need the glasses to read.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
Affairs in Liberia. Honorable Hilary R. W. Johnson, who was inaugurated president of Liberia at Monrovia 7th January, is the first native Liberian who has been elevated to the presidency. A number of native chiefs and their people came many miles from the interior to be present at the ceremonies. Mr. Johnson is considered by natural ability, education, experience admirably qualified to perform the duties of his high position. C.T.O. King, a native African, was by a large popular vote chosen mayor of the city of Monrovia on 4th January for 2 years. This look like this election.
Yeah, right.
The desire is becoming general among the Aborigines and along the coast to share with the American Liberians in the privileges and burdens of civilized government. And the latter returned exiles are feeling more and more the truth that they are largely dependent on the natives to build up a powerful nation in West Africa. The legislature had passed a law for the establishment of high schools in each of the 3 Leeward counties and making for their support an annual grant of $2,000. The bark Monrovia arrived out 8th January with immigrants sent by the American Colonization Society. One of our passengers writes, "We are more than pleased with the country. We have not the tongue to express our feelings in regard to the future possibilities of this land and can only say, come and see."
Come and see.
Yeah, come and see.
You see the energy and the spirit that was in this movement, and I always want to find that moment, where this changed, because something happens in Liberia to change the spirit of togetherness, this camaraderie. There's something that is inserted, a kind of divide and conquer. So Hillary Richard Wright Johnson was the son of Elijah Johnson. Elijah Johnson's wife died. Elijah Johnson had only a surviving daughter. He separated himself from the Commonwealth and lived among the Dagola people. Hillary Richard Wright Johnson, who became president's mother, was a native woman who had been educated. Then he himself marries a Gola woman. So the connection between these Johnsons and the Gola people runs deep. So you've got President Johnson. They're calling him native for 2 reasons. One, he was the first president of Liberia to be born on Liberian soil, and he was birthed by an indigenous woman. And then you have C.T.O. King, who's being called a native African because that's what he was. So you had a lot of intermarriage. You had people coming, realizing, hey, because when you go to school with people and you're classmates with people, you and your classmates become one, regardless of your background. You see sometimes on these old rosters, they'll have, immigrant from Massachusetts, or immigrant from Pennsylvania, immigrant from Virginia, heathen parents. Heathen parents, I'd be like, oh, I think that's us, right? when the Christians are writing, they won't even put a person's ethnic group. They'll just say heathen parents. And then you have to look at, figure it out. So a lot of times we can't even tell when they say heathen parents, is this a Basa person? Is this a Grebo person? Is this a person Day? And then sometimes they'll say Mohammedan, and you can say, okay, maybe this person was Vai or Madingo. Sometimes you can't tell. But, we see that they were all in the schools, and we see that there was a mindset that, as they say, and most of the people who elected C.T.O. King were indigenous people and recaptured Africans, the people we call Congos today, because they saw C.T.O. King as one of themselves. And this was also one of the reasons Hillary Richard Wright Johnson was overwhelmingly selected. He was the first president. I mean, he went unopposed. Both political parties endorsed him for president. That's never happened before. Imagine being such a rock star politically that the opposition said give up and say, yeah, our man, who we want. That's really, this is what was happening in Monrovia, in 1884. They sitting down there and they looked at Hillary Richard Wright Johnson. The opposition to the True Whig Party was like, you know what? Yeah, I agree. That's our president.
Understand. Hillary R. W. Johnson in 1884 went up against Blyden. We're not talking about somebody who was we're talking about Blyden here. But
Blyden ended up endorsing him. He went unopposed, really. He didn't defeat Blyden. Blyden threw in the towel. Blyden was like, you know what? You're right. Hillary's my president. Think about it. Imagine. Yeah, and black guy running, and we have to say, you know what, my man? I'm behind you.
No, don't use those two.
I mean, it's just recent, right? That's the most recent election. Why wouldn't I use them?
Yeah, let's use We Are Ellen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, maybe that's a better analogy. Dennis is so political. Oh my God. Let's move on. I just got what you did there.
Someone said, Dennis, please let me know when you are ready for us to go to Liberia. I'm ready. Instead of being superintendent of Sano, you will be the mayor of Monrovia. You see? You don't like me.
I want Dennis to be the mayor of Greenville.
No,
how about this?
Greenville is one of the most beautiful cities and most historic cities in that country.
Mm-hmm. And you got so much nature there, man. That would be prime, man, to be mayor.
Turn it all into like a big ecotourism port to dock tour ships, just like Antigua and St. Lucia and Barbados, and everybody going to Greenville. That would be nice.
This is 1820.
Yeah.
1822.
1920.
Oh, nice. Well, you know who typed this slideshow up. Madam, not proofreading anything, right? So this is sometime in the future. No, so this is supposed to say 1820. Around 1820. So this is just what we're gonna do now is just go through the pictorial slideshow before you open it up for callers. I just wanted to give people kind of like a walk down memory lane.
1920, y'all. They said 1820. That is 1920. Ain't no cameras was like that.
It's 1920, Dennis. And no, and not only were there not cameras, they weren't building these kind of structures. There was no anyway.
Next.
I think what happened was, anyway, I know what happened. I just fat fingered the two numbers because they're next to each other.
Yeah.
So this is Front Street. Now, remember the grid I was telling you guys about how it was laid out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the roads were not paved. They just laid out the grid so that the homes would be built in straight lines and be accessible and have space in between them. So these roads were really like fields. So it's almost like how we do in modern times. We create these road reserves. We say, okay, this is going to be a road in the future. Like Sugarloaf Parkway has a road reserve about half a mile from my house that they're going to, turn into something 2025, right? But that road reserve's been there for probably the last 15, 20 years. Saying, okay, this is future expansion. So they're planning ahead.
And nobody is going to build on this.
Nobody's going to build on the road reserve because one day it's going to be a road. And guess what? It became a road.
I saw on the social media today where the city water and sewer, somebody built over the fire hydrant. so they went to, there's a place that the fire hydrant is there, but now there's a house over it.
I mean, yeah, that's wild. And they're building over swamps, all kinds of stuff. The regulation that should be in place isn't in place, unfortunately.
That's urban sprawl right there. Recipe for disaster.
Do we really have a city of Monrovia anymore? Do people build and sell anyway?
I mean, it's urban sprawl. Pretty much people just, building like anywhere. Is like you just sprawl, no coordination, no planning. It's just.
So this picture is from the inauguration of one of my favorite Liberian presidents that called Toga, our Bassa president. Who's that? Bassa Bari. Toga. Who do I call Toga?
Mr. Daniel Edward Howard.
Daniel Edward Howard. His name really wasn't Toga. I just call him that because he was the wartime president, World War I, all kinds of, he penetrated the interior. But I just love this picture because during his inauguration, people came from as far away as what is now considered Suakoko in Bong. People came from far and wide to attend his inauguration. If you look closely at the crowd, you can see it's a mixture of people wearing indigenous attire and Western attire. And it's just a beautiful scene of unity of Liberians. The people, there's a fence, the dignitaries are inside the fence and the general population outside of the fence. So if you see the fence in the background, inside the fence is where the people got all the fancy umbrellas and stuff. And you can see the indigenous kings and leaders mixed up with other people. And then outside is like you see a lot of kids, maybe, just people from the city. But this was the inauguration and the guests. I think that's just beautiful. So, and then the next picture, this is from around 1920. This is from around 1920, a picture waterside, I think. So you can see up the hill there. And this is another view of the same area. Oh, I'm sorry, this is Freetown. I'm sorry, this is not Liberia. Let me double check.
Say Monrovia, Liberia, then.
Yeah, the thing on the the primary source said Freetown, so this is probably Freetown.
Actually, nope, this is Monrovia. I think it was listed incorrectly. This particular photo is Monrovia. So this was Harry Hamilton Johnson's photos. He had both Freetown and Monrovia in his photo gallery. This particular one is Liberia. I'm looking at the source. So this is Liberia. You can go to the next slide.
This is Monrovia from the lighthouse.
So this is around the year 1910. And this is up Snapper Hill. You got the lighthouse up there at the Cape where they have the fort. And I think now they got the Roberts Monument, Ducal Hotel. And someone standing up there on the lighthouse taking a picture going down.
Hmm.
Do you recognize this place, Dennis?
No, I don't recognize Monrovia anymore.
It feels like it's Broad Street. I don't know why I feel like it's Broad Street.
Let me text Dennis. Dennis went to Monrovia College, so you live in Monrovia.
Yeah. I was there in 2017, and the whole place is different, so that confused me.
It just feels like Broad Street.
Up Ashman Street.
That doesn't shock me. I know that either be Broad Street or Ashman Street.
Yeah, let's go to the next one.
Yeah, there's the Maserado Lagoon.
Yeah. So this is also from around 1920. And this is on the other side. So this is between Providence Island and Bushrod Island. So the person taking the photo has their back to Bushrod Island. And you can't tell because the depth isn't very visible, but this is Providence Island, or it could possibly be Gomez. You know, Providence and Gomez were joined to be one island now. I think this end is the Providence Island end, or it could be Gomez. But this is the Meserado River. And this is wherever the photographer's standing, their back is to Providence Island. I'm sorry, the back is to Bushrod Island. So this is probably either Providence or Gomez Island, where that tree is, and then on the other side is more river, and then you get to the houses. You know where this is, because this is where the Gabriel Tucker Bridge crosses right now to get to Bushrod Island. So that water side on the other side there. And this is again Ashman Street. Nobody's building on the road reserve. It's just a field. Children can come out here and play, but you don't see anybody putting their house up. It wasn't allowed because they knew one day they needed to put a road here. And if you put your house there, it would just get knocked down. So order, there was order in the city. You couldn't just build anywhere. This is what we consider West Point. I know a lot of people think that Crewtown was up on the hill. It was not. Crewtown in West Point, if you look at all of the old pictures from the late 1800s, early 1900s, the actual photographs, Crewtown is exactly where West Point is located today. And so New Crewtown is actually on Bushrod Island. Crewtown was where we have West Point today. It was not up on the Cape as some people think. This is where it was. And every reference shows Crewtown at this location. And go back a second, Dennis. With the exception of the fact that they don't have zinc on top of the houses, this is in the year 1910. It looks like West Point looks just like this. With the exception of the fact that the houses are made out of natural materials. I think there's one zinc house way in the back there, if you zoom in, but with zinc roof. But the rest of them, most of these look like thatch roofs. But this is the way West Point is today. You go to West Point, the houses are just together, just like this. So they're not even built in the circular grid that you see when you go to Grand Cru, when you see the towns built in Nimba, when you see the villages, they built in a circular grid. The reason this isn't structured the way the towns are structured in the interior is because this was a migrant place. Crewtown was built by migrant workers. A lot of young men established the town, and they were there at a prime location to be able to carry load to and from ships with their canoes. So it wasn't organized the way you would have seen a town organized, on the Cru Coast, for example. If you had gone to Nana Cru in those days, it wasn't going to look like this. It was going to be organized on a circular grid. But because this was really a place for migrant workers, they kind of just jumbled their houses together. And I know a lot of times people get confused. They start thinking, oh, well, the native people, they're not throwing houses. No, they did not just throw houses together. This was because there's a bunch of migrant boys that established the place, and they were just doing what they felt like doing. But when they go back home to where they were born, there was order and structure in the way the towns were laid out. And that's still evident today.
Yeah.
In a lot of our towns. So, of course, they call this the executive mansion, but this is, I think this is the king. I don't think this is Robert's house. I think this is King's house. I think this is the King mansion.
Yes, this is King's mansion.
Yeah.
Pretty cool mansion. I love the architecture.
Yeah. It's great.
Oh, I must have messed that slide up. But this is Robert's house. This is the one that we call the executive mansion, because that was JJ Roberts' house.
Mm-hmm.
So this again, this is probably Ashman Street from a different view, or it could be Broad Street. I'm not sure. It just says on the way, to the Cape. This could be Broad Street or Ashman. But if you look up in the upper left corner, you can see the fort with the cannons there, facing out to sea. Do you see that? If you zoom the picture, look in the upper left corner of the photo. You can see in the upper left, there's like the cannons facing out to sea. The highest point in the picture on the left.
Going all the way to
yeah, that's what was built. That's where Fort Stockton was built, and all the subsequent names they have for the fort. And then that's where those cannons were located. And you can see the cannons very clearly in the photo. University of Liberia. This is around 1906. This photo was taken, courtesy of Sir Harry Hamilton Johnston.
Yeah, it's the TH building, I think.
And look at the people standing on the balcony of their school.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this school was so prestigious. Former presidents wanted to be president of the University of Liberia. Many former presidents became presidential candidates, and great people like, Edward Wilmot Blyden were presidents of the University of Liberia. This was a prestigious institution.
And that was the thing to do. Now, the same people are running to be representative or senator or president.
The most educated people in the country are running for president and representative senator. The most educated people in the country wanted to be president of the university. They didn't want to be. That's where, because even for you to be president of the university, you had to have accomplished something. So he said, okay, we don't care that you're a lawyer or you've been a senator, but I've also been president. Okay, you've been president of Liberia, fine. You qualified now to be president of the University of Liberia. That's how it was. They looked at even the presidency to be a stepping stone, because the university was where you molded the minds of the young people, of the future generation. So the institution, the vision, and the head of that institution had to be thinking into the future. What do we need to build for tomorrow? How do we mold minds for tomorrow?
Now the university, they've been looking for president for what, 5-6 months now?
Yeah, bark at your boss, man. That was not, you made a dog set vest. All right, so this, of course, this is taken around 1920. Liberia, this is a parade of our regiment, the 1st Regiment. So we're talking about Togar again, the man of war. I wonder whose great-great-great-grandfather this is in the right-hand corner that they captured on film there. He was just a boy, probably admiring these soldiers, saying, man, one day I will wear this uniform and carry my own rifle. Wow. Imagine how they felt seeing these guys as young boys. They were probably so excited seeing these guys lined up on the street. I think this is Broad Street. I'm not sure. It's hard for me to differentiate between Broad and Ashman a lot of times on these old photos. I believe it's Broad Street. Okay, so this got flipped around somehow, but it says Monrovia on the Cape. So this is another view. This is the same photo. It's just a flip side of the same photo. So yeah, we've seen this already.
Yeah.
So this again, we're looking at about 1910.
So it's getting more recent.
I like the design on the fence in front of this house. Oh, you now go forward. Okay. And of course, Waterside, Monrovia.
Oh, beautiful.
Most of the people in this photo are either Crow or Gribble,
Yeah, I can
or a
see.
combination, what they call half Gribble, half Crew. This is where a lot of people settled, because these are the seaside warriors.
See, that person look like my great grandma.
Which one?
on
This
the
is
left.
way older than your great grand. Well, maybe not. I think you said your dad was a lot older than he. Yeah. So
So
I when I look at these pictures and I see these children, these are people's great grandparents.
Yeah, this girl look my great grandma on the left.
Ah.
Yeah.
And some people's great great grandparents, because this is about 1920. But I want you to take note of something. I don't see any dirt or trash on the street.
No.
Palm Grove Cemetery.
No Zogo there.
No fence. So this is a road running through. Palm Grove Cemetery is on the side. It's on one side. So this is all urban sprawl now. You've got buildings all there, and you got a fence, a big fence where the women are walking. There's a huge fence. And then on the right of that, there's just a wall of buildings going down, right? But you see the road?
Yeah.
It wasn't paved. Nobody was building on the road. And then the last slide, you can see the church there. This is definitely Broad Street. I wonder whose great grandparents are walking down the road. So they're dressed nicely, but they're not wearing shoes.
Yeah.
Dressed very nicely, but not wearing shoes.
If you wanted to be so sure-footed, you don't wear shoes.
Really?
Yeah. So even when people went hunting, when you get closer to the animals, or where you take off your shoes.
Ah.
Yeah.
But do you notice how structured the streets are? Clean?
Yeah. Very clean, well laid out.
If we've done it before, we can do it again. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to cover kind of a pictorial history and kind of highlight a couple of our brilliant mayors from that time period for everyone.
The pictures I love that layout. That layout is on point. I was on mute, but I said I love the layout.
Yeah. And this is so they're crossing a street, but there's an intersection there, right? Even though you can see clearly that there's a grid, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And that was what, this is the kind of thing our forefathers were able to do. And then people would say, oh, that this other group built these houses. It's the same people who were living to West Point that built these houses. Those were the builders. Those were the masons. Those were the carpenters. These churches were not built by only repatriated people. The skill and labor was a joint effort. I've had somebody say, oh, but the Native people ain't builders. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And it's even documented. They were paying them. They had to recruit workers to do a lot of the layout of the city. They paid them very measly salaries, and but they paid them, and they did this work. And so the city was built mostly by these young men who had migrated to the coast and were already doing labor for ships and stuff like that. And this is something, this is extra money we can make. So they could go back to Dennis' hometown and be boasting and get all the pretty girls after they've earned their money. Because that was what it was about.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the History Channel. We have concluded the presentation for tonight, and we are now opening the phone lines so that you can be a part of the conversation. 605-313-6004. The code is 791-403#. Fidel Dennis said, if Liberians had the mindset of the past people who saw the nation as everything to them, we will be in a better place right now. Those people did not use expensive tools to design the city. We need skills individuals to help build this nation.
Yeah.
All right. That's all the time. I don't think
we got any callers. Okay. Any other questions that were asked?
No, I mean, the next session will be 1924 to present. And I hope we when we talk about major, we should also talk about the law major, Tamakoji.
You want us to highlight Tamakoji in the last episode? I see. Do you see? Okay, I think Tobasi left a comment. I don't know if you see that. I don't know who that is. Tobasi.
Yeah, Tobasi. It's not in the. Maybe it's on the.
He said, "Who plans the city? Who planned the city? Maybe." He said, "What was the architect's name? Who plans the design of the city?" So a lot of the repatriated people, the repatriated African Americans were Freemasons. They were carpenters. They were builders. They were former Army people like Elijah Johnson, part of the Black Infantry, Army Corps of Engineers. They were builders. So a lot of the people who built cities and homes in the northeastern United States were some of the same people who went to Liberia with these skills. So you have to remember that these were skilled people. The people who went there initially were not really coming from plantations. Some of them were agriculturalists. You see that come later. But that initial group from the Northeast, these were people coming from places like Baltimore, from Brick City. These were bricklayers. These were people who were already building churches and buildings and infrastructure and laying out roads. So they just came and replicated this on the ground because they already knew how to do it. I know for a fact Elijah Johnson was part of the planning. So was Hillary Teague. These guys had skills beyond the fact that they were pastors. They also had been laborers and what do you call it? What do they call them? Tradesmen and foremen and things like that, right? So yeah, that's the beauty of. And then the other powerful thing here is that when you have journeymen on the scene, you then have these indigenous boys being apprentices and learning the skill. And then being able to go on and build infrastructure and build things and also sell their labor and their skill in the future. So we see that happening. So Tabasi, it was a joint effort with a lot of these skilled people leading the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all we have for tonight. Carl, let's preview our next history of Monrovia.
So next time, what we're going to do, of course, is we're going to cover the period from 1924 to present, and we're going to talk about positive things. I'm going to really intentionally stay away from the war, because that is something that is a story all by itself. So we're going to focus on nice things. who the first female mayor of Monrovia, for example. We're going to focus on major events in infrastructure development in our city, because if you notice, a lot of the city is still dirt roads. So after 1924, we start paving, initially in concrete, right? We start paving concrete roads starting around 1925, 1926. We start building bridges in the 1940s. We build an airport in the 1950s, and so on and so forth. So we're going to talk about a lot of infrastructure. It's nice to look at these old, 19th century, 1800, late 1800s, early 1900s, these towns and these old houses, but you start seeing a lot more modernization in the following 100 years. The Gabriel Tucker Bridge, the Antoinette Tubman Bridge, which came before Gabriel Tucker Bridge, two major bridges. When the old bridge, which was the Antoinette Tubman Bridge, collapsed, one of our hip-guarded Lucky Buckets said, "The country running on one bridge." So, he said the city running on one. No, he said the country was running on one bridge. And I thought that was so funny because when the bridge fell, we only had the Gabriel Tucker Bridge. So, old bridge fell. Gabriel Tucker Bridge was then the new bridge. Now Zolu Duma Bridge is the new bridge. But it was funny, before President Salif commissioned the Zolu Duma Bridge, the country ran on one bridge for a long time. We're like, bro, Lucky Bucket made a song about it. So he said, the country running on one bridge, it might look small. Yeah, but this one bridge can't carry us all. Something like that, he said, but it was funny. But we're going to talk about how those things came to pass, how our port was built, the free zone. Because as I said before, Monrovia is a port city. Monrovia is a port city, and that's what this is about. So that's it.
Thank you. Well, let's Jabari, you're closing.
I don't have much to say. It was to say, be proud of your city. Know the history of your cities. You got to know what Monrovia was, how it was established, some significant events that shaped it, because that's how most cities are around the world. You know some stuff. If you ever go to England, about London, you know the history of London, some of the great wonders of London, or New York, or San Francisco. So it's time for us to do it just for our cities. Know what Monrovia was, significance about Monrovia, this major historical events, especially in part 3. So that's all I have to say. Love your city and enjoy it. Get to learn about it.
Yeah, and so the last thing, sorry, right, you make a good point. Because it's the whole diaspora return, and there's sites, we're going to talk about how they rebuilt Providence Island. A lot of people don't know that Providence Island is an artificial formation. It was built. It was rebuilt because it was almost completely washed away. So we're going to talk about why they rebuilt it, and we're going to talk about the bridges. Bushrod Island was pretty much empty. It had some villages. They didn't have a lot going on, but it is between 1924 and present that even Bushrod Island becomes this bustling part of Monrovia. It wasn't really part of Monrovia before that. Places that we consider to be part of Monrovia now were completely separate towns. Cinco was a town by itself. Monrovia swallowed Cinco. Congo Town was a town by itself. Monrovia swallowed Congo Town. This all happened after 1924. So Monrovia was not as big as it is. Monrovia now extends into Bushrod Island, Somalia. I'm not going to call it Japanese Highway. Somalia Drive, and all these places became Monrovia after 1924.
You got to get with the game. It's Japanese Highway now.
I don't play those kind of games. I don't play those kind of games. When the Somalian people get rid of Liberia Road, then we can get rid of Somalia Drive.
Before we close, and Jemai raised a very important point. Why is there not much interest in the history of our city? Or is it, I'm not saying it, especially Monrovia. Is it that we are preoccupied with food and data? Is that why?
That is why.
So I think that has to do with just the bigger picture. When you don't have much interest in learning just your history in
Yeah.
general, the major points of your history, historical events, then you don't focus on the things that make it up. You know,
Yeah.
the history of this river, you know, the history of the St. Paul River, or the history of Monrovia, or the history of Greenville, or the history of Bopolu. You don't really see that as important because you don't even see the significance of your entire country's existence as being important. So how can you focus on Monrovia if you don't even care about how Liberia was established or how Liberia came to be?
Is it because people think their lives not getting better? They are suffering like a hungry man is an angry man. Is that what is playing that?
I mean, I don't know if that's the case, Dennis, because a lot of places in this world people are hungry, right? In Haiti, people in Port-au-Prince are suffering right now. There was massacre just yesterday at Port-au-Prince. People are suffering, but Haitians know the history of Port-au-Prince. They know the history of their country. You know, they know about their past leaders. They know their heroes. Haitians will tell you their story.
Mm-hmm.
In all of their pain and indignity, Haitians will tell you their story. Haitians will tell you that they ended slavery in the Western Hemisphere. They will look you in the face and they will explain how they did it. But Liberians cannot look us in the face, or the average Liberian. I look people in the face, and I'm sure Dennis and others would look people in the face and say, we liberated Africa from colonialism, because it's true. We did. We were that beacon of hope. We instigated it. We incubated it. For the entire continent.
OAU, we'll
like,
talk about it later, but the OAU, which leads to the African Union, starts in Monrovia. You had that conference.
So the reason hunger is not the answer, Dennis. It's not hunger. I think it's because even hungry people are educated or indoctrinated or miseducated, right? So hunger is not the reason. It's just for somewhat whatever people decided to bury the history of their country in a very shallow grave.
Because they would not tell you that history will eat. That's why I use that. Or is it that people don't think they should be proud of something? Because if
you don't know it, how you'll be proud of something you know nothing about? And all they tell people is, oh, the people came here and they were wicked, and then we killed them on pool, and now we free. Who wants to learn that kind of history? Mm-hmm. If I believe that, I wouldn't want to read any history book about Liberia. It sounds horrible. Mm-hmm. But because that's the narrative that's been beat in everybody's head, nobody is interested in really knowing what happened. Because they're convinced they already know, and they think it's a sad short story. Mm-hmm. That's what happens when you bury history. I said it's nothing to do with hunger. It's because the history was buried, so they don't care.
Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate, but
I mean, I think people. Yeah.
And if you're watching us, the question to you and to all of us is: so, what do we do at this point?
I mean, we are saying.
I think, you know what I think should be done, Dennis? I think if I had power and if I had money, I would take your platform and elevate it to where it needs to be. You spend your life and your time and your energy finding weirdos like me and Jabari who read too much and say, come share what you've read with my fellow citizens. You find people like Mr. Sharif and Dukley and these scholars, these thinking people, and you call them and say, hey, come share your thoughts with our fellow citizens. And they do it for free, and you're doing it for free. And it's not sustainable. The level of work that you're doing, the selfless contribution that you're making to your fellow citizens should not only be recognized verbally like what I'm doing right now, you should be elevated to a place where you can be compensated comfortably to continue doing the work you're doing. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but I would not be on any other platform spending months and now almost 2 years of my time if it wasn't for the fact that I think that your work is selfless and sincerely meant to to do better for your people, your fellow citizens. And that's what patriotism is. You know, and this is patriotism isn't getting up and going to Monrovia. I'm running for president and y'all can't give you rice. That's not patriotism. This is what you're doing. Selfless. And you've been doing this for years. So I'm here, and I'm sure Jabari's here because of the example that you've set. You know, I could read this stuff. I'd read anyway. And just keep it to myself.
Mhm.
But it's because you said, come and share it. You're spending all this time digging in these books. Come share what you learned. That's powerful. So I really hope whoever's listening understands this, because I don't really see Dennis Jai has an equal out here when it comes to this kind of selfless commitment. And I you know, full disclosure, he's my in-law, but I'm just kidding. No, but in all seriousness, I had to end that serious tone with a joke. But in all seriousness, I mean every word I said, Dennis. You're very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, every time you talk to people in Liberia, it's like, we're just going down. I mean,
This is helping, Dennis.
yeah, students.
It's helping. Your work is not falling on deaf ears. It's helping.
They can even say the word. Anyway, at this point, we're going to end tonight on this note. Really appreciate your time, and even those who watch later. Don't forget, we have this on YouTube. They arranged in playlist. If you want anything about the History Channel, it's right there. Liberia History Channel. There's a playlist there. You want something on the New Day, which is about all the women issue and all that. The New Day is right there. There's a playlist. You want things on literature, the Literary Hour. There's a playlist. You want politics, Tough Talking Thursday or Friday Night Debate. There's a separate playlist. So this is like, I mean, we're serving a whole menu. Pick what you want and dig into it. It will surely benefit you in our country. At this time, we're going to close with a song that says, "We are all Liberians." Have a good night and God bless you.
Thank you.
You too.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our